I'd like to call the April 23rd, 2019 Board of Adjustments meeting in order. First item on the agenda is approval of the minutes from the June 26, 2018 meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Second.
All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. We'll move on to number 2, new business, but actually before that, it sounds like we have a new city staff member that Aaron would like to introduce.
Yeah, thank you. So it's been a while since we've met. In the meantime, I guess Barrett Voigt, who you previously has previously presented at these meetings, he took a new position with Cass County, so he's a Cass County planner, and we also hired a new assistant planner, Maggie Sire, if I'm saying that correctly. So I don't know, maybe if you want to get up and introduce yourself, or at the mic there, I'll let her talk here.
Yeah, so like Aaron said, hi, my name is Maggie Squire. I just moved here from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I'm the new assistant city planner in the planning department. So it's nice to meet you.
Welcome.
Maggie will, you'll likely see her at these meetings in the future as she becomes more familiar with our processes. So,
So we'll move on to new business. First item on there is a variance request for 5407 88th Avenue South. Aaron?
thank you. So this request, as you mentioned, is for a variance. The address 5407 88th Avenue South is actually in outside of city limits within the Fargo extraterritorial area, south of Fargo, just kind of straight east of the city of Horace. The request for the variance is for an accessory structure having to do with the height of the accessory structure. Basically to allow an accessory structure to exceed 15 feet, which is the maximum accessory structure height within the SR1 zoning district. There is an existing, just maybe a quick aerial maybe. Again, this property is in the extraterritorial area. I believe it's the site of an old farmstead that has kind of been platted in 2004, and that's when it was zoned to SR1 as well. The area surrounding is all in the agricultural zoning district. There is an adjacent, I believe, residence immediately to the east. Other than that, it's pretty much just farm fields in this area. Some background on the site here and the request. The applicant constructed a 16.5 foot tall pole barn in the year 2013 without obtaining a building permit. Again, the accessory structure limit in the SR1 zoning district is 15 feet, and so the building is approximately 1.5 feet taller than would otherwise be allowed. The applicant is in the process of trying to obtain a building permit and get an inspection completed for the pole barn, but cannot do so due to the existing zoning violation, the structure being too tall. And so the applicant is requesting a variance in order to bring the pole barn into compliance with the land development code in order to complete that building inspection process and get that building kind of permitted retroactively. The requested variance is actually a 2 foot variance, again 1.5 feet for the existing structure and then 0.5 feet just for some fudge factor there. I don't believe the city staff has actually measured the building. It's self-reported by the applicant, and so we'd hate for there to be a situation where it's 1.6 feet or something like that. So as outlined within the staff report, there are 5 review criteria for any variance requests. I'll go through each of those 5 review criteria now. Criteria A, the requested variance arises from conditions unique to the subject property not ordinarily found in the same zoning district and are not the result of the owner's intentional actions. The applicant constructed the building, as noted in his application, for the storage of a large camper and maybe some other equipment or vehicles. Staff suggests that large vehicle storage buildings are not consistent with the intent of the SR1 zoning district. The SR1 zoning district is primarily intended as a residential zoning district for residences. The desire to store a camper or to otherwise build a taller accessory structure is neither unique to the subject property nor to rural properties in general. The SR1 zoning district, there's not a whole lot of SR1 zoning. There's actually no SR1 zoning within the city of Fargo city limits. There are, I think, somewhere around 8 to 12 rural properties that are within the SR1 zoning district in the extraterritorial area. SR0 and the AG agricultural zoning districts are also found in the extraterritorial area, and they do allow accessory structures up to 35 feet in height. Ultimately, staff finds that the requested variance arises from conditions that are self-imposed by the applicant and does not arise from conditions that are unique to the subject property. So as a result, staff finds that this criteria has not been satisfied. Second criteria, criteria B, the proposed project will not adversely affect the rights of adjacent property owners or residents. Staff has no data that would identify any adverse impacts to any adjacent property owners. Staff did receive one phone call from a neighboring property owner just kind of wondering what the letter they received was all about. They didn't have any concerns once it was explained. So that last bullet point is outdated. Staff finds that second criteria is satisfied. Criteria C, the applicable standards will constitute an unnecessary physical hardship because the property cannot be used for an otherwise allowed use without coming into conflict with applicable site development standards. The vehicle storage is accessory to residential use of the property and is not required for the use and enjoyment of the property for residential household living. Staff also finds that alternative options would be available for the intended purpose of the building, storage of large vehicles. So ultimately, staff finds the strict application of the applicable standards will not constitute an unnecessary physical hardship because the property can be used for an otherwise allowed use without coming into conflict with applicable site development standards. So, in essence, the need for the building isn't, or the enjoyment of the property as a residence isn't encumbered, I guess, by the requested variance. So staff does find that this criteria has not been satisfied. Fourth, criteria D, the proposed project will not adversely affect the public health, safety, or general welfare. Here again, staff has no data that identifies any adverse impacts on the health, safety, or general welfare of the public. Staff finds this criteria has been satisfied. And lastly, the variance is the minimum variance that will overcome the hardship. Staff finds that the proposed variance would be the minimum variance needed to allow the structure as exists. Again, staff does not find that there is a hardship, however. So if you look at it in terms of there being a hardship, then this criteria would be satisfied. I would note, I think there is a typo in the staff report. And so I would just reference this slide in lieu of that section of the staff report. So ultimately, staff, we base our recommendation strictly on the review criteria. And as noted, criteria A and C, staff was not able to find those two satisfied. And so as a result, staff does recommend denial of the requested variance. And we have a recommended motion on the screen in front of you as well as in the meeting packet. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions or to kind of go over any of that information again.
Would it be an option for this property owner to rezone to SR0?
That's a good question. And so we actually did talk to the applicant early on prior to the submittal of the variance application about what are the options. And so we did look at SR0 as well as the agricultural zoning district. The issue with the SR0 is there's actually there's a minimum acreage requirement for any SR0 rezoning. I don't remember off the top of my head what that acreage is, but it's quite a bit larger than just one single property. It's my understanding the SR0 zoning district was originally established to allow for kind of hobby farms or the keeping of horses in kind of these rural residential areas. And there's a lot of language in there about kind of having a shared open space, I think, for animals and things like that. And so it's a little bit more tailored to that type of development. And so since this property owner only owns the single lot, it wasn't an option. Likewise for the agricultural zoning district, the minimum lot size for the agricultural zoning district is 10 acres. And so the property is quite a bit smaller than that.
Aaron, I had kind of requested that you'd maybe just give a brief kind of history of how the zoning was established for that, since it was originally outside of the city and then become part of the ET.
Yeah. So I was able to find the original staff report this morning. And so the subdivision and zoning took place in looks like the end of 2004. And I think at the time, the previous owner, I think it was a family farm situation where, a relative wanted to build another residence at the site of their family farm. And again, I think they ran into issues with agricultural zoning requirements and there being a minimum of 10 acres, for each dwelling unit. And so at the time, they had to look at alternative options. And so ultimately, I think what I gather is that they were looking for a balance between, agricultural preservation and kind of allowing some flexibility in terms of these family farms. And so the SR1 is where they ultimately landed as kind of being the more restrictive in terms of requiring larger lot sizes. There was a fear that, if you were to do SR2 or some of the more common SR zoning districts that you see in the city of Fargo, there might be opportunity for future subdivision. And kind of one of the main goals of the agricultural zoning district is to preserve agricultural land around the city until this city kind of reaches those areas in order to allow for some more structured growth patterns. And so I think SR1 was found at the time to be that balance between allowing some flexibility for the current family, but still being restrictive enough to not allow for additional subdivision of the property. So again, the original intent was to subdivide and add a house in 2004. At that time, they also dedicated some right-of-way for 88th Avenue South, which is an arterial street, so that when the city does get there, that has already been accommodated.
So the SR1 zoning was established when it was platted in 2004, is what you're saying?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Aaron?
In previous meetings, we have talked about accessory buildings and the trend of having additional housing units above garages, and the planning department possibly adjusting that height limit to allow for that accommodation. Has that been reviewed or looked into subsequently?
I think I know what you're referring to. So a few years back, the City Commission established, I think, the Residential Land Development Code Task Force. I forget what exactly they called it. But as part of those discussions, there was that task force. I think there was 2 Board of Adjustment members, 2 City Commission members, 2 Planning Commissioners, and 2 Historic Preservation Commissioners on that task force. And kind of the purpose of that task force was we were seeing a lot of high volume of variances, and to see if there wasn't some flexibility we could build in the LDC to allow for some of these more common requests that we see. Part of that discussion did involve accessory building height. And that was a common thing I think that we were seeing was, folks wanting to add a second story to an accessory structure, and it being hard to add that second story with a 15-foot height restriction. And then related to that was the conversation on accessory dwelling units. Ultimately, the task force had kind of 3 sets of recommendations. The first set of recommendations was some immediate tweaks to the land development code. And I think that included some setback revisions as well as building area revisions, specifically I think to the SR2 and SR3 zoning districts, as well as some allowances for larger square footage of accessory structures. The second set of recommendations was kind of a midterm recommendation, and it didn't involve immediately amending the land development code. And I think the accessory structures was one of those midterm things that we'd like to kind of continue the discussion on, in the future years. I think it maybe within the next 3 to 4 years. Long story short, I think there was a lot more conversation that needed to happen before I think anybody was comfortable modifying that requirement. I would add too, maybe just for your general information as well, staff on the planning department in our 2019 work plan, we are looking to do a land development code diagnostic study. And so we're actually in the process of drafting a request for proposals right now to have a consultant come in and basically do a full review of the land development code. There'll be kind of stakeholder input and different opportunities for different groups and folks to provide input as part of that process. And so if I think our thought process is that that discussion would kind of roll into that consultant study, and they could provide some recommendations on, what are some best practices from across the country, what are some pros and cons to modifying, such a requirement, things like that. And so it's still on our work plan, I guess, to look at it is kind of the short answer.
I have a question for you, Aaron, on the measurement of the height. Is it to the eave, the peak, or is it to the average middle of a slope when you measure height?
Yep. So height, it's a little, the measurement for height is outlined in the Land Development Code, and it's different depending on the type of roof. And so for this type of, pitched roof, it's the average height of the eave and the ridge line.
It's the middle of the slope or
Yep,
whatever.
the middle of that slope there.
Okay,
We measure the middle of the slope to the ground level of the adjacent wall.
okay.
And so you might see in the staff report, there's some references to 19 feet. I think that's the height of the peak. And so after the application was submitted, we had some correspondence via email to,
All right. That's what I was wondering, where it was being measured to.
yep, so that 16.5 is that midpoint.
All right.
In our packet, does it say what the peak of the building is?
I think it's just referenced in the aerial image that was provided by the applicant.
Oh, there it is, 19.
Yeah, that might be the only reference to it in the actual packet.
Okay.
Another thing I have for you, Aaron, is I've seen, if this was attached to a house, I've seen structures like this built in town that they can park fifth wheel campers in, but they're attached to the primary residence. And they are that higher than this even. So that would be true?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah.
So the way that the heights work is the primary structure, primary building, is allowed to be up to 35 feet in height.
Yeah.
And so if you have a garage that's attached, it's technically part of it's considered part of the primary structure.
Okay.
It's a detached garage, and so it is allowed to be up to that 35 feet.
Because there was a guy near my house that built something like that, but it was attached to his house, and it looks strange, but probably a lot stranger than this guy's outbuilding, I'm sure. Okay.
Any other questions for Aaron? No. Would the applicant like to address the board? No? Okay. Any discussion? Or is there a motion?
Make a
Well,
motion to,
I have a question. When did the applicant acquire the property?
I'd maybe defer to the applicant on that question.
Could you step up to the podium, please?
In 2012 is when I purchased the property, and I built this structure in 2013.
And were you aware that you were not aware that you needed
No,
to get a
I was on the
permit?
country. I didn't think I needed building permits and all, because my neighbor's a cornfield, so I didn't think I needed to go through the building permits and all that stuff. So looking back, I wish I would have hired somebody, then they could have guided me. But me and my father built the structure. But like I said, my neighbor's a cornfield. I didn't think it was a big deal. But looking back, it was.
I'd like to ask one more question. I noticed the adjacent property has a fairly large accessory building.
Yep.
Do you know when that one was built or what the height might be on that one?
I think it's bigger than mine.
Okay.
But I don't know if he did permits or any of that stuff.
Sure.
so this whole issue came up because you asked to put in a garage door, is that?
Nope, I just wanted to get a building permit. I wanted to get everything all squared away on my property, just in case Fargo comes closer to me. I'm like, I gotta get all my ducks in a row before I do have neighbors.
You did this on your own
I did this
volition?
on my own. I wasn't forced by any city official or anything to do this.
Quick clarification, if we are to make a motion to accept the staff recommendations, a no would be a yes to them, essentially.
Yeah, well, if you make the staff's recommended motion, then that would be to deny the variance request. So a yes vote would deny the variance request. So if you would like to make a motion contrary to that to approve the variance, then you just modify the language to say that you move to approve the requested variance. Okay. Any other discussion? Is there a motion?
Make a motion to approve the requested variance request to allow the accessory building height in the SR1 zoning district to stand as built.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Nope. Please call the roll.
Wendell Dobb,
Yes.
Breen,
Yes?
Lundberg,
Yes.
Ford Dunker,
Yes.
Love.
Yes. Your variance is approved.
Great, thank you.
Moving on to other business, annual nomination and election of officers.
So I can provide a quick background. There's a memo in your packet there. In summary, the bylaws of the Board of Adjustment specify as the annual meeting in July of each year being the meeting at which time election of officers takes place. That would be for chair and vice chair. The last time I think this board met was June of last year, and so obviously we haven't met since July when the elections were supposed to take place. And so we wanted to throw this item on the agenda. One, to hold elections kind of retroactively or following up on last year's requirement. And then also we wanted to have just a discussion on how the board might want to handle these in the future. You know, it's likely that this situation, you know, might happen in future years. And so if there's any desire of the board to, you know, host or hold elections differently, I think staff included a couple of recommendations in the memo that we wanted to throw out there. And then if you guys had any other suggestions or wanted to do things differently, we just wanted to have an opportunity to have some discussion with you all. And then if need be, you know, we can obviously amend the bylaws accordingly and bring that back to you in a future meeting. But just a couple of recommendations that staff wanted to throw out there was, you know, one option might be just to hold a meeting in July, even if we don't have any applications. In that case, there might just be one item on the agenda, which would be election of officers. Alternatively, if you didn't want to convene just for the purpose of elections, we could also, you know, amend the bylaws to, you know, maybe hold the elections a few months prior to when the new positions would take effect, and that might provide us, you know, multiple opportunities at multiple meetings to hold the elections, you know, prior to the effective date, if you will. Still might run into an issue where we might not have an application for half a year or something, but at least it provides, you know, maybe some multiple months for us to have the opportunity to have an application, and then we would just have the elections at the, you know, a month or two or three, you know, prior to the effective date. So with that, that's kind of all the comments I have. And
Sure. So I would say, I mean, this is just my personal opinion, but I mean, it's been 10 months since we had our last request, so I mean, there is a chance that we may go an entire year without having a request, and I think, I mean, as a board, I think we should be meeting at least once a year. So, you know, I would be in favor of just keeping the bylaws the way they are and just have a scheduled meeting in July. I mean, even if we just meet for 5 minutes to, you know, elect positions and move on, I mean, I think that's a good idea personally.
Yeah, I'm fine with that too.
Yep, I would support that.
So, everyone kind of in agreement there?
I agree.
Okay. So we shouldn't have to change anything with the bylaws then?
Correct.
So there shouldn't be any action needed there, but you do want us to appoint positions until probably July, or do you want to just ride this out until July and then we'll do our elections in July?
yeah, I guess that's kind of up to you guys as well. However you want to handle that, we could either kind of do elections now, that maybe, you know, the next cycle would be a year and what, 3-4 months or 2 months.
Quick question on that. If we do elections today and change the makeup of the board, would the actual makeup of the board not change until that date in July? So the current positions would stand until that date?
I think what I was trying to say is you could hold them today. Elections or the new offices would take effect today, and then it would just continue until July of 2020. Or, you know, you could just wait till July of 2019, and, you know, essentially the positions, you know, currently held would just be kind of a 2-year term instead of a 1-year term, just since we didn't really, you know, meet recently. So it's kind of up to you guys how you wanna do it.
Well, if we truly follow the bylaws, we would vote on the positions today and then meet in July and then vote again. Is that correct? Because we missed a cycle.
Yep. Yeah, I kind of agree with that approach. Okay, so I guess we'll do elections for the next 2 months then. Are there any nominations or?
I nominate Mike Love to the chair position.
A second?
Motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, pose same sign. And I would nominate Deb as the vice chair.
Second?
Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. We have any other business? Doesn't look like it. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So move.
Second?
I'll second the motion.
All right, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Okay, we're adjourned.
Okay.